Welcome. I'm really excited to move through the Type 5 archetype with three really lovely and fascinating individuals. So, would you mind taking a minute introducing yourself, Bethany? I'll have you start.
Yes, my name is Bethany. I'm a 5 wing 6. I live in Houston and I'm a school teacher. I teach fifth grade reading, writing, and social studies.
Awesome. Thanks
I'm
for being
Kaylee.
here.
I'm Kaylee. I live in San Diego and I stay home with two kids. My daughter's 5, my son is almost 2, and I am a 5 wing 6.
Awesome. Thanks, Kaylee.
And Richard Miller, I'm a 5 wing 4. I live in San Diego also, but Kaylee and I don't know each other until now. I'm married to my wife Cheryl of many, many years, and we have 2 daughters. One is a therapist who actually works in Aaron's Radical Wellness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my older daughter is 37, and she's married and has kids and lives up in Santa Barbara.
Well, thank you all for being here. I know time is our most precious commodity, so I appreciate you sharing yours with me, and then the gifts of how you think and feel and move in the world with others. So I do not take that for granted. Thank you. And I wondered if we could just start with how you came to sort of know and understand your Enneagram type, and did you experience any sort of resistance to it? Or did it feel like a good fit from the get-go? Just anything that sort of feels relevant to the discovery of your fiveness.
I will happily jump in first. So I had a friend recommend the book The Road Back to You to me several years ago. And as a 5, I read it very quickly, all in one night. And what I did was I would read the first 20 statements at the beginning of each chapter. And then if it didn't fit me, I'd skip to the next one because I just wanted to know so badly what number I was. And I got to the 5 chapter, and a lot of the statements were like hitting the nail on the head. And so I was thinking, okay, I'm probably a 5. And then I read the 6th chapter, and the 6th chapter hit a lot of, things on the head too. And so I kind of had a little bit of a life crisis, at that time, because I didn't know which one I was. And so I actually took a long time, several months before I decided I was a 5. I went back and forth for a while, read the chapters over and over again. And eventually I finally came to the realization that I do hoard my time and energy. And that is the core of me. And that is kind of what solidified in my brain that I'm a 5.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a really typical process for lots of people that take lots of time to reflect and figure out what feels true. So, yeah, thank you.
So I actually was asked by a friend. They were like, "Oh, have you heard of the Enneagram? You should find out what your type is." And so what I did in my very 5ness is I read through all of the descriptions of all of the types and all of their wings. And I was like, I'm a 5 wing 6. And she's like, did you take the quiz? And I was like, no, but that's what I am. I know that. And I took it and it matched exactly. And so as I started like deep diving more into it, and when I took the 6-week course with you, one of the things that I feel like no matter how much I try and in a healthy way move to other types and absorb the other goodness of types, my core fear is always going to be in the 5s.
Sure. And that's a great way to know where we land, where we start, where we sort of contract, right? It's awesome. How about you, Richard? I know you've explored type for a long time.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I did it for a long time, but maybe I got into this 7 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And the person that told me about it was Samantha, your cohort, my daughter. And I was getting involved in some stress management techniques that use biofeedback to try to kind of control a heart issue I had back then. And I found out about Enneagram through that because I felt it would help me if I really understood who I was, because I've done DISC tests and the Myers-Briggs and all that stuff for years. But Enneagram really struck me. It's a lot more complicated than those, which mean, being a 5, I like complicated, and I'm a scientist, so complication's fine. But when I read it, and then I met with some people who were different types, and I just really felt this really explains a lot to me about who I am and how I'm built. It made me more comfortable with who I am. And as you said, I'm a relational 5, which you know, I'm not an introvert who hides in my house all the time. I can go out and relate to people, you know, to a point, and then it's like, okay, I'm done. So, you know, but it really has helped me socialize with people more easily too, because I understand what I'm comfortable with I'm okay with that, and what I'm not comfortable with. So I draw a boundary. I said, no, I don't want to do that, you know. So, and I do, Bethany, I do protect my time and energy like you do. I do that. And my daughter Drew does it too. So it's really great to understand. It's almost like I went somewhere and somebody explained to me, you know, you're from the planet Mars, you're a Martian, and this is how Martians are. And I thought, oh, great, okay. And there's other Martians around too, and that's fine.
And I fit in just fine.
Yeah. Us Martians are fine.
And it's so lovely to sort of hold the complexity of the instinctual pattern and how it creates subtype, right? So we've got self-preservation, social, and relational, and each of you sort of represent that. Our work is to sort of learn to embody all of these instincts. You know, we sort of sit in one out of habit. And this is where we can sort of get to some complexity around seeing the 5, right? The behavior. If I sort of just watch behavior, I might think people are 5s who they aren't, or I might, you know, miss a 5, right? And so each of you might move in those behaviors in somewhat nuanced way, but the motivation might all still feel the same. The pull might feel the same. So the self-preservation 5 might find themselves being protective. You know, I think Beatrice Chestnut calls them like the keepers of the castle, right? Like, I'm gonna really draw some hard boundaries around life. And all 5s are really oriented to boundary. But I'm going to sort of draw those really hard boundaries, where the social 5 might really pull out into the world and say, how do I take this sort of thirst and avarice and really expand my knowledge, right? This beautiful 5th grade teacher who's starting a podcast, and right. So like, how do I pull broader with this hunger and this thirst and this sort of inability to satiate? And the relational 5 can be mistyped because there is that sort of connectivity when a relational 5 is in a relationship that feels safe, right? When they can sort of get underneath the 5-ness. And Richard also has a 4 wing. And so there's a lot of sort of tenderness and softness and even romance that comes from his sort of natural tender spirit, which is why I really wanted you to come on the panel, because I think you really illuminate this beautiful quality of a 5. We think maybe that there's an isolation and an inability to connect, and you're going to sort of break all those stereotypes that there is this capacity. It just requires my safety first. And so the 5 construct is to sort of hoard or have this avarice for, or create boundary around to protect my energetic resource, my knowledge, so that I have enough, so I don't get depleted. So what feels true to you about that, and how does that show up for you in life and work? It's a loaded question.
So I'll change this. I'll shake up the order here.
Yeah.
You talked about the romantic side of my 5-ness. I truly relate to that. And fortunately for me, my mother liked to take me to movies when I was a kid, and she took me a lot of musicals. And I was born, so these were movies in the 50s. Okay. And one of my favorite movies was High Society, that had Grace Kelly in it, Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby and those people. And there was a song in there where Bing Crosby sang a song to Grace Kelly's character, and her name was Samantha. Okay, and that's why Samantha is named Samantha.
That's amazing.
How romantic is that? And I didn't even know what I was doing. That's what I did.
That's awesome.
So that's my example.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you use like the gatekeeper or the castle keeper, because I feel that a lot more in motherhood than I think
Sure.
I've ever felt it before.
Mhm.
Especially now that I'm going to have a child going off to school, I feel very, very keeper of the castle kind of thing.
Sure.
I think what's interesting in my subtype with the self-preservation is that you say like hoarding knowledge and time and energy and stuff, and that's totally 100% for that's 100% me.
Mhm.
But I also find that the safety aspect is huge in that, and I think that I can start breaking out of that when the
Mhm.
safety is there. So
Mhm.
I feel like because I have so much, I've hoarded all this knowledge and all of everything, I have an interest in everything. Like I can find something in common with every person, and I've seen or read multiple things on everything. And it makes it so that you can, or I can relate to a lot of
Mhm.
people. But it's just always kind of feeling safe first.
Mhm. Sure. That feels clear. How about for you, Bethany?
So for me, being a teacher, which is a very social job, and
Mhm.
getting in front of children every day, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and having to be extroverted and get them interested in reading and literature, it takes a lot out of me. I am completely depleted by the end of the day. And
Sure.
so when I get home, I'm often just tuned out to the world, like I'm not talking to anybody, and I'm just like watching TV or something, totally, numbing out. And it's interesting because I actually find myself planning out when I'm going to use my energy.
Mhm.
Definitely not at the or in the middle of the week at the end of the day. Not going to do anything outside of teaching. And then on the
Mhm.
weekend, I usually do like maybe like one event and and then I'm going to not schedule anything around that one event to make sure that I have the energy to do that one event because I really want to, since I am very social, but I
Sure.
have to be very careful with what I plan. Even today, as a matter of fact, I recorded an episode of my podcast with Grace this morning. I told her, I said, it has to be in the morning because I have this thing in the afternoon. I have to have a lot of time in between so that I can recover.
Yeah, that's beautiful knowing, right? We sort of being aware, being able to, and that's what I love about the Enneagram is being aware, being able to name it means that I can do something about it and I can take care of myself in a really authentic way. So good for you for knowing what that looks like. We have a little joke in our house. My son is 4 and he just moves at a much slower pace than his sister. And so he has coined that he gets to do things at Louis' pace. And he'll chant it to me, Louis' pace, Louis' pace. And he sort of reminds me, this living embodied reminder that folks get to do it at their own terms and their own pace. And so while the rest of society may be pushing us harder or clicking faster, I love the sort of resistance that I see in the 5 energy that it says, no, wait, I'm going to create a boundary and take care of me. So thank you for being the model for the rest of us on what it can look like to be boundaried. So how do things, right? Because we often understand the 5 through intellectualism and this incredible capacity to hold information. And often information becomes the protective strategy over emotion, right? I can intellectualize it and then I can sort of make sense of it. So how does gathering information or sort of holding on to what you know or what you do, or this like insatiable desire to learn, how does it show up in your life, or how has it shown up in your life?
I have an interesting like story growing up. So I have multiple times have had, friendships that fall out, and I've always been labeled as not empathetic. And
Mhm.
that always seems to be a reoccurring theme in the end of these relationships or in arguments or whatever, that I'm not being empathetic enough. But I'm over here like, I understand completely what you're saying. I just can't emotionally get them to see, because I'm thinking it
Mhm.
versus showing it. And so I feel like I have spent a lot of time, especially in parenthood, because that's my job right now, learning all about different types of parenting and learning about all these things and really diving into like certain ways to do it, or new ways to try, or new tips or whatever, so that I can be empathetic for my kids, because I don't want them, I worry that that's like the one thing that keeps reoccurring. I don't want them to think that I don't care about their feelings.
Sure.
But it's, I've realized that a lot of my like recent learning and stuff and hoarding of that information is all about how to share emotions and connect emotionally. And so my whole life, up to like 30 years of my life, I was hoarding information to know things, and now I'm hoarding information to feel things. And it's very
The irony.
and it's like me really trying for that.
Yeah, the irony in that, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to jump in real quick about emotions and understanding emotions. We do feel, we do have emotions. It just takes longer for us to get there because we are processing and looking at the situation, analyzing it to understand. And then we feel the emotion. It might take me 3 days before I realize the situation made me upset because I'm thinking about, why did that happen? You know, I'm analyzing, I'm turning it around. Like, it's almost like I'm studying like a box or something, and I'm looking at it and trying to figure out what exactly happened. And then I feel, oh, that made me upset. Okay, this is anger I feel, and I can identify the emotion. It just takes longer for us to get there, where our emotions just aren't on the surface.
Yeah. Preach it.
Well, so that's easy. So I'll agree with both of you, Bethany, especially what you said. I mean, that's the way I am. Like when I get upset about something, I've learned to, and when I understood I was a 5, that helped me understand better how I'm slow at processing, I'll call it heart issues or emotional issues. But I said, okay, I'm not happy about that, or I'm sad, or I'm angry, or afraid, or whatever. But said, and somebody might ask me, well, why, what? And I said, I don't really know. And the way I am, I just tell people, I said, the way I am, I need to go think about this. And then I'd go think about it. I'd let the emotions subside and think, go to my strong suit, which is thinking about it and looking at data. And then it would dawn on me and say, oh, okay, that's what bothered me. And then I'd go back, and sometimes it would lead me to apologize, which made my wife happy. So, so actually, I owe you an apology because, da, da, da. And so, but I always try to do the right thing. So if it's the right thing to apologize about something, I have no problem with doing it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the beautiful honoring of how it takes us, what it looks like to get there, right? And that it gets to be unique. And maybe we find ourselves in relationship with someone like me who has a really hot, forward moving energy that might push faster. I'm married to a 6-wing 5. And so he has some of those tendencies to want to sort of go in and process. And early in our relationship, I was way too pushy. And he's been a beautiful held space for me to be like, let him do it in his own terms. He always comes back because love and tenderness and respect are there. But if I give him his space, it's more clear. So that's a beautiful recognition by all of you.
And I just want to add one more thing too.
Yeah.
My boyfriend is a 4-wing 5. So he has that existential gap between the numbers. And he asked an interesting question the other day. He asked me, what do you think or feel when you look at art? Because him being a 4, he is very much into art. And he said his gut reaction is to feel about it first. And I said, well, I think about why the author chose, or why the painter chose to do that. I'm always thinking why, and then I feel the emotion. So I think something when you're thinking about 5s is our question at the top of our brain is always why, and then we can process.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what can people in your life, or what would you tell other 5s who are looking to sort of verbalize to people in their lives, what helps you release the holding back, right? What helps you sort of get back into engagement with people and with feelings and sort of the sticky parts of life.
Not sure. I'm not sure I understand that question. Maybe I
Mhm.
should let somebody else answer it and I'll see what they say.
Or I can rephrase it if that's helpful.
No, let's see what Bethany or Kaylee says. Maybe I'll figure it out.
Well, the main thing I was going to say is time. I recently had a very like busy week, and my friend reached out and was like, "Hey, do you have time to talk?" And I was like, "I don't today." And it was like Thursday, and I was like, "But like maybe like a week from now." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And with any other, without knowing that, I think I would assume something is wrong with me. Like I can't be someone's friend right now or something like that. But really it was just, I put a lot of effort into these various things and I just needed a minute to kind of catch up with myself.
Yeah.
And so it was nice that she was like, "Oh, no problem. Like we'll reconnect next week or something." So for me, the biggest thing is time. I don't even think it's necessarily like anything productive in the time, but just the actual like passing of time away from whatever I was doing or whatever activity or the people. Sometimes it's always like, "Oh, well, you can just like go take a shower or go do this and do something that's completely different thinking wise." But I think I also need that time distance from said thing.
Sure. That feels clear.
Yeah, and referring to what can people do to help or understand us, like for me, don't necessarily push me out of my comfort zone too far, because I have a tendency to withdraw even further in. If somebody is constantly pushing me, I'm going to resist even more. We have those hard boundaries and we're pretty clear about our boundaries. And so we just need people to understand that we're not trying to be mean. We're not trying, we're not trying to upset them or anything. It's nothing personal at all. It's just we have these boundaries and we need people to respect the boundaries in order for us to function and take care of ourselves.
Sure. So time and, not being pressured, which also feels a little like, give me time, Yeah.
And I think where I've had to work on this the most is more social as opposed to at work. Social being, people in our church or our extended family, Cheryl's family, my family, our daughters and their friends. So what's helped me as I understood more what I'm like as a 5 is that I don't do that well with people who really all they can do is small talk. Because I can't, I'm not very good at it. Because I like to, talk about global warming or, what are the latest statistics on this or that, or, something more deep. And it's interesting and I have a lot to share. So what I try to do in a lot of these situations, these are people that I see periodically, so I know what they're like. So I tend to try to migrate over towards the ones that I know can handle more information. Like they don't have a big TMI sign on their forehead or something like that. So.
And that's a beautiful. Oh, go ahead, Richard. You don't want?
I don't try to give those people, those relatives or friends too much information because I know they're just not interested. And that's fine. I don't, doesn't bother, it used to bother me, but then it's like, that's the way they are. That's okay.
I think that's a beautiful representation of the relational instinct too, sort of understanding this sort of like heat seeking of knowing who can also match my intensity, who can be in that sort of deep cognitive connection with me. So we can see that you can sort of source who those safe people are to have the in-depth intellectual conversation about, climate change or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and it's funny because growing, I have a PhD in science, and some of the PhD types I didn't like because they really were, let's say they're all a bunch of 5s, which they probably weren't, but some of them were too 5y. Like they would just talk on and on, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, man, these people are boring. Maybe that's my relational side coming out, right?
I don't know, but I love it.
No, I relate to that too, because sometimes I see an unhealthy 5 and they're kind of being a know-it-all, which we have a tendency to do very easily. I'm very aware of that, so I try not to be the know-it-all. And so when I see it in a healthy five, I'm like, oh no, you need to chill.
What would you say your greatest gifts are? Whether that's something you discovered because of naming your five or not, but what would you say your gifts are?
Well, I think one gift which has really helped me in my career, because I was educated as a scientist and then I became a business executive running companies that did science and engineering. And you really have to be able to do a lot of research and retain a lot of information and analyze it and then communicate with a lot of people. It's very detailed, heavy duty stuff. And we're involved in some really big, somewhat risky programs over the years. And that really, really helped me do that job. And I didn't know I was a five when I started doing this back when I was, 28. So I had no clue what I was, but it really, being a five really helped in that career.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And when
I
people,
have two that, oh, sorry, Bethany, you can go.
Okay. I was gonna say, when people ask me this question, I typically say, actually, the lack of empathy is kind of a superpower. It can be negative, but at the same time, we're able to remain completely neutral in a lot of situations. And for me, with teaching, when I have kids that are acting up or trying to get a rise out of me, they're just not going to, because I'm not going to have an emotional reaction. Or when two kids are fighting or whatever, it's just, I can look at it very unbiased and give them a very neutral answer. And it helps solve the problem quicker. And also, friends will come to me for unbiased opinions, and I'm not necessarily relating to them because of the lack of empathy, but I can give them a straightforward, honest answer, and I think they appreciate that from time to time.
That's awesome.
Okay, mine are so similar, Bethany.
Okay.
So I was going to say too that with the lack of empathy, I feel like I can really hold space for a lot of people's feelings and a lot of people's struggles and not take that with me.
Yep.
So I feel like I'm a good sounding board in the neutrality of it, that like people can kind of dump, but it doesn't like come with me, because I'm always like, I don't care enough about it's like my joke, like I don't care enough about other people to like take that with me. But I feel like it's a good way for me to use that to like hold space for people, where people can come and they feel safe and they feel like they can say things, and then they don't feel like I'm taking that with me, that they're bringing me down or something like that.
Sure.
But the other one is problem solving. The first question to every, the first thing I always am like, well, why? Like, why did they do that? Why did they say that? Why are we going this way? Why did they decide to do it that day? Like, and so my ability to like problem solve is always like the first thing. And maybe that's kind of a downfall in terms of like, sometimes you don't need to solve problems. Sometimes you just need to let people feel. So that's been a learning, but I always am like, well, let's fix it. Let's solve it. Let's get it done. And walk away happy and proud that we did that.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
To that? Okay. So just real quickly, I've gotten a number of compliments over the years in the workplace of people that work for me, that I am very interested in people's opinions and their position and the information they have and their perspective of a plan or a problem or what have you. And usually when I get with people to try to figure something out, I listen a lot first, and I ask questions. And I've gotten complimented by a number of people saying, really like the fact that you ask questions, you want to know what we think, because there are usually a lot of really smart people. Because there's certain types of leaders, which I'm not one of, who just come in and just start telling people what to do. Here's what we're going to do. You do this, you do that, and I want it done by Tuesday, and meeting's over. And they just walks out, and really irritates people when you have some really high quality people working for you. That's not a good way to treat them.
Yeah, that's beautiful to sort of remember in your gathering information, that you're honoring other people's knowledge and gifts and perspectives.
Yes, and we're really great at turning the conversation on other people by asking the questions so that we don't have to open up. We can just let them talk, and they'll love it. It's great.
Yeah, I actually use it. That's a good point, Bethany. I usually use it as a technique to kind of, when I'm in a meeting with people I don't know, kind of ask them a few questions just to probe them to see what they're like.
I also feel like another Oh, sorry. Another thing in that too is like, it, I'm not offended very easily. And I don't know if this is something that you guys experience too. I am I am willing to take in a lot of people's opinions, and I want to know their thoughts, and I want to kind of understand everything before I make a decision, regardless if that's, you know, what they agreed with or not. But I'm not very offended when people are like, I think you're doing it wrong. I'm like, perfect. Tell me how you would do it. How do we fix it? How do we make it better? Because I don't claim, I think a lot of times fives are the know-it-alls, and people think that they know everything. And I'm like, I am very aware of the fact that I know very little, but I'm always willing to learn more. And so I feel like in certain circumstances, especially in the workforce, I tended to not be as quickly offended as maybe
Yeah,
some workers in the same position.
that's awesome. I had five I worked with once remind me of their fiveness by saying, by the time I bring a solution to the table, I need you to trust that I've done a heck of a lot of work to bring this solution to the table. And so that I really think that this is something, right? Like I'm ready to share this. And that was a really great experience for me to remember that what I was given wasn't a first draft by any stretch of the imagination. This was the closest, best thing to final as they could get. And that really helped me sort of honor their effort and the process that they walked through. So what's something that you would want people to know about how your type shows up that maybe gets read the wrong way, or, you know, folks don't put language too clearly, right? We can sort of project our own things. So what's something you'd want people to know about when your type is showing?
One thing that kind of bothers me is, and some of these people, well, people who understand the Enneagram a little bit, and so that it's not like something totally foreign to them, is when they find out I'm a five, a lot of times people will assume that I'm an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I say, well, that doesn't necessarily mean you're an introvert. So that's kind of one thing that's bothered me. And so I've had to kind of correct that perception a little bit.
So are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Well, what I like about what Erin analyzed for me was she said you're a relational five,
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
because there's a span within the five, and I think if you're on one end of a five, you could really be pretty much an introvert. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And introversion and extroversion are a state of consciousness. They're a mindset. And so we sit in one out of habit, right? We might find one that is more accessible to us, but yet we have the capacity to be both pretty easily. And I think Richard, holding such a long, deep career where you've had to lead, you've had to be in charge, and being relational and having that four wing, all sort of adds this layer of connectivity in behavioral pattern that might be different from somebody who sits in a self-preservation five wing six who has a desk job that, you know, doesn't interact with a lot of people. We can sort of get held into that behavioral experience. So I do like challenging the norm that not all fives are introverts. Just like I'm a seven, I'm not an extrovert, I'm an introvert. And so I think that gets too binary.
Yeah, real quick, one technique I developed was, that's the science part, doing experiments in social situations like parties where there's a lot of people there, maybe like 30, 50 people. What I found didn't work for me is, like, you see people you want to talk to, and there's 3 or 4 people talking to each other animatedly, and they're extroverts, let's say. And what didn't work for me is to walk up and stand there in a group of extroverts and kind of wait for them to talk to me, because they're not going to. Doing their thing. So I realized, okay, this next party I'm just going to kind of go stand in the middle and just wait to see who comes up to talk to me. And it worked great, because the people that walked up to me wanted to talk to me. It was really easy. So you just kind of wait.
That's awesome. How about you, Bethany? What do you want people to know when your type shows up?
I think for me, it's about the boundaries. And I know, like, fives are kind of elusive sometimes. You're saying you were having a hard time finding a social five.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that, because I personally don't know a lot of fives. I don't think we congregate together because it's hard to get to know a five. We do have a lot of boundaries. Grace, my podcast co-host, she's a 7 wing 8, and she described getting to know a five like an obstacle course where you have to earn it. And once you earn it, though, you feel very accomplished and you get opened up to this like world of knowledge, because once you get a five going, they're not going to stop talking. Like once you find the thing that they're obsessed with, they're going to talk your ear off. And that's what she has experienced with me. And so yeah, I think the boundaries are strong. I think they're clear. But if you get past the boundaries and you put in the time and effort, because our time is precious to us, and we think other people should also respect the time and that it's precious to us. And so if we see that you're putting in the time and effort to get to know us, we're going to let our boundaries come down. And then you will get to know this amazing, awesome person who has all this knowledge for you and who will give you unbiased opinions. And I think fives are wonderful.
Yes. That's awesome.
I know. I feel like I'm pretty biased too, because I really like my fiveness.
Me too.
And I don't know if I've met a lot of other types that like really, they're like, oh yeah, I like some things about me, but I've never met a five that's not like, no, I love being a five. But like the one thing I think is like, at least for me, if I've gotten into something, I've really like put in time and effort and learned. So when people find out I'm a five in the Enneagram, they kind of are like, oh, so you're kind of like withdrawn, or like, you don't have a lot of friends, you're an introvert, those kinds of things. And I'm like, actually, no, but like, also, I probably know more about your type than you know. And I know myself better than you can, even in a type, like you can understand. And so I think when people honor the boundaries, they start to really honor like me as a whole. And I feel like that's where you start getting these really cool nuances of fives, and they're really cool, like very niche things that they love to do, but also just the plethora of like resources. I started an Instagram per this thing because I had all these resources that I hoarded about like where to take my children and like where the bathrooms are at every specific location. And people were like, you should share that with people. And I was like, they don't care. Like, they don't care, because no one cares about much as like me if there's a changing table in the bathroom. And they appreciate. And so I feel like when someone really like appreciates the very specific things that a five has spent their time on, like that's when we can be friends, even if they don't love everything that I love. Like, we can be friends if you appreciate how much I love.
Yeah. And how much time and effort goes into it, right?
Yeah.
And to hear Bethany, you say that time is such a precious commodity that when you choose to give your time to something, that's sort of what I've held from being in team and leadership with fives, is like when they choose to spend their time on something, I'm going to really treasure it because I know I got the best of them. So we all have to resource, we all have to sort of recover and find our way through life, right? We get pinched, we get stressed, we get overwhelmed. What are things that have worked for you that allow you to sort of recover from the low side of behavior, right?
I'm trying to think. I think that the stress and growth numbers are fascinating, and fives go to a very unhealthy 7 in stress, which is radically different than what we normally look like. And for me, it's understanding that and knowing that when I take on a chaotic kind of energy and I can't get anything done, that I'm at my stress point and I need to find ways to get back to my regular number. And so it's things like making a list, to help me get back to that. Because typically I don't make a lot of lists because I kind of hold it up here. And so I don't necessarily need to make a lot of lists, but when I feel stressed, I'm like, okay, I got to make a list to, make sure things get done. And then I know we've said a lot, but time again, time is something that we need in order to process and to get back to our healthy place.
Sure.
Yeah, I think part of what I do is what Bethany said. It really helps me. I've used daytimers forever. Old good old daytimers. But I like to have a list, have a plan for a week or a month or a year, and then that puts me at ease. But if it's on the list, it's going to be okay. Because when something's on the list, I do it. The other thing I do to get relief and refreshment is sports. My favorite sport is skiing. We used to live in Colorado when I was a kid, and surfing and bike riding. So all of which have to do with speed. So as I've gotten older, I've realized you can't go as fast anymore. It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
But I still do all that stuff, and it's just so refreshing to go do that.
That's awesome. So getting in your body, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting out of my head, because one of my fun things to do is read like fiction books, fictional history and stuff like that. I'm a reader. I'd probably be happy reading for the rest of my life, but that's part of what I like to do. So even though in my work I'm reading and analyzing a lot of stuff, one of the things I do to relax is read a story.
Yeah.
You get into that, you get into the story.
Yeah, it's like book candy, and you just like eat it all up and you read it super fast. Yeah, I totally understand.
Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna remember it. I'm gonna have some candy. Yeah. What are you doing? I'm eating this book here.
All of those are true for me too. Like moving my body, and then doing something that I enjoy. Reading is good because it's slow. And I find that what I've really taken to recently is like meditation. And it's not something I used to do all the time. I actually was a competitive swimmer. So I swam hours a day for like 15 years of my life. And I realized just recently that the swimming was a form of meditation for me. It was repetitive, it was silent, it was the same, and it was predictable, and it was
hypnotic.
It was very, and we would do it for a long time. I mean, 2 hours at least, was a long time. And so I realized, like, when I go to my 7, I'm like so unhealthy, and I'm like, this isn't who I am. Like, what is going on? I realized that I like benefit very much from the actual like not movement and the silence of like that meditation can give. And so something repetitive. So even anything that requires like stitching, or anything that is the same kind of motion over and over and over, is something that I found that actually gets me out of my head, because I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
But then also requires me to like do something and hold something. And so that's what I've recently found.
That's really awesome. All 3 of your recommendations are really helpful. And Bethany, you bring up a really good point, the way in which we as type connect to other types. And some literature talks about how we move in one way for stress and one way for health. And so as a behaviorist, we just add a little more room to that and sort of recognize that we have the capacity to be like an unhealthy 5 or a healthy 5, an unhealthy 7 or a healthy 7, or an unhealthy 8 or a healthy 8, right? So Richard, you might find this like need for speed sort of connects to this excessiveness of the 8, or the spontaneity of the 7. We get to have all of these gifts, but where the 2 has an opportunity, or I'm sorry, where the 5 has an opportunity for growth, is this sort of stretch into 2. Where I can learn to sort of be in contact for meeting other people's needs, right? That's where maybe empathy lives. And so it's all of these beautiful characteristics of the Enneagram that can really embolden the 5, help it sit solidly in its gifting, right? We're not going to change who we are, but sort of tether these strong ropes to these other resources and say, I'm not alone. I don't have to do this on my own from this seat. I have all of these other tools. And each of you represented that really beautifully as you sort of held to the excitement of book candy, right? Like, and how that's a joy, right? It's a beautiful exhibition of the 7 to have joy in knowledge, or to be excited about curating an Instagram page that makes it easier for moms, right? Like, so you all 3 exhibit these beautiful qualities of the 5 and all of its resources. And I just really appreciate you sharing that with me and with anybody else who's sort of grappling with where they sit in this really complex methodology, and to see all the gifting and the talents and the resources that the 5 brings to the world. And it's so, so necessary. So I am beyond grateful for your sharing a little piece of me. So thank you, or a little piece of you with me.
Well,
So thank you.
You're welcome. Let me throw something out here real quickly before we run out of time, which is, and this is from the heart. I really like being with 5s. I like being with Kaylee and Bethany. It's almost like we're, I don't know what word to use. It's almost like we're of the same nationality or something.
Kindred spirits.
Kindred,
spirits,
right?
Yeah, kindred spirits or whatever it is. And is that common, Erin, that feel like that?
What has happened with every single one of these panels that I've done is folks have left feeling really seen, being in community with folks who feel and act and need like they do, right? Because we sort of move around in life, defending or protecting or sort of championing the way we need to move. And it's not often that we're doing that in partnership or in community or in relationship or in family with people who are just like us. And so we're often sort of carving our own path. And so to sort of release that and to be with like-minded people, it's like, oh, I am normal. My needs are valid. Yeah. It's a beautiful experience. In Buddhist teachings, it's Sangha, it's the community and the communal healing. So I'm glad you felt that way, Richard, because I do, and I'm not a 5, but I love 5. So
can I add something about the 2s since you mentioned it?
Yes.
I have a hard history with 2s. It is the one type that I cannot get along with. And,
me too.
Oh my gosh. I always try to figure it out because I'm like, why? Because the way you look at it, 2s should be a connection. Like yes. It should be. And there's always like a dashed line because the 2s and the 5s cannot get together. But I think what I've been learning and what you were talking about with the 2s is that they have this like abundance about them. And they're like I feel like they're the opposite. So like they're too abundant. And I'm over here like, this is not, you have to rein it in. You have to bring yourself in. You have to. Yeah. And so what has helped me when we were talking about it, another thing is trying to frame things from a place of abundance. So like trying to be like, oh, it's not that I don't have enough time to do all of these things. It's that I get to do all of these things because I love doing that, or I get to do something new because I am excited for, broadening my world and stuff. And I think that the mental shift, but honestly, I think that comes from sometimes a lot of 2s. Like freeness with their time and energy and stuff. And so I've tried to, I don't know if I'll ever really have a great relationship with the 2, but I've really tried to pull that like abundance mentality from them because I think that they're doing something very right in that.
And that's a beautiful recognition that we look at type through the lens of our own, right? So you don't have to be a 2. It is learning their gift and how I apply the gift to me, which is exactly what you're saying, Kaylee. I'm like beaming with pride, just at how radical that is to connect to. And that's it. The tether for the 2 and the 5 is for one another, right? The 5 can learn radical contact and the 2 can learn radical self-awareness, radical self-acceptance. And we have something to share with one another without being each other. We can be ourselves.
Yeah, so we're talking about this. My mom is a 2. And so so you can imagine our history pre-Enneagram and post-Enneagram. And so we always butted heads when I was growing up, and we never were on the same wavelength. We never understood each other. She would just straight up, cry about things. And I'm like, I don't understand why you're crying. Like, this is not an emotional thing, and that'd make it worse. And so it was just like a whole thing. But yes, like I was actually going to say something similar to Kaylee. Like my word for this year has been abundance, actually. I chose it at the beginning of the year. Abundance was my word. And I have tried to live with that generosity mindset for the past, 6 months, and trying to give more of myself, and telling myself it is okay, I will be fine.
Yeah.
That's funny. My word was release this year. And so I feel like it's the same kind of thing. Like things are coming, I'm just releasing. It's okay. Something else will come. And I feel like that's a good fear of mine, that like, if I don't enjoy it now, or like take it all in or do it, it's not going to come back. And so, yeah, my word this year was release.
Awesome.
That is awesome. Richard, were you going to say anything? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I just said that was great. I love it.
Well, you all are beautiful, beautiful souls. Thank you for being here and sharing all of that. It's a total gift to me. So thank you.
Thank you for letting us. I feel like this is where we love it. We love to talk about it.
We do.
We enjoy talking about our fiveness.
Yeah.